Deputy Governor of Anambra State, is now a member of the ruling All Progressives Congress. Nkem Okeke, who is Governor Obiano's deputy, defected from the All Progressive Grand Alliance. His defection was announced in a meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari at the presidential villa. It was presented to the president by chairman of the APC Caretaker Committee, Mai Malabuni, and the Imo State Governor, Hope Uzodimma. Okeke's defection comes less than a month to the November 6th governorship election in Anambra State.
I believe that I have a lot more to contribute to society, and I can do a lot more. And when APC approached me about joining the party, I thought, seriously about it, and I felt, well, if I want to make a contribution to society, you can only do it two ways, either in the private sector or in the public sector. And I'm more comfortable in the public sector. And I believe that with you as president, what I can do before we hand over March 17th next year, that hopefully after that I'll still be able to contribute to your administration, Mr. President.
And our people believe that our policies that is meant to integrate and unite Nigeria will be a strong legacy we leave behind. No wonder even elected members of the National Assembly are joining APC now, even to the extent that the Deputy Governor of Anambra State has just joined. I'm also aware that if the governor has his way, he will join. We'll also try to extend hands of friendship to him. Mr. President, you're a great man, and I'm very proud to be associated with you. Your leadership is working, and Nigeria is working.
The important thing is that we are making people to understand that we are working for greater Nigeria. So you are welcome.
Thank you.
And I respect your courage for taking decisions. It takes a lot of courage, for you to come out courageously, bring along your supporters, and explain to the rest of people that this is the best direction for your geopolitical zone. This is the best position for you.
Meanwhile, the Inspector General of Police, Usman Alkali, is assuring Nigerians that there will be maximum security during the upcoming elections in Anambra State. The police boss gave the assurance at the Squadron Commanders Conference held in Abuja. He asked officers to remain apolitical and ruthless with violent elements while soliciting interagency cooperation with other security agencies and officials of INEC.
The election security plan will, as usual, revolve around units of the police mobile force. The import of this is that the task of securing our democratic values and guaranteeing a safe, secure, and credible electoral process in Anambra State will rest squarely and majorly on some of you that are here. Most of your operatives will be deployed to deter subversive elements that are planning to threaten the process, while others will be deployed to secure personnel and materials of the Independent National Electoral Commission, as well as other critical national infrastructure. While the detailed operational action plan in this regard will form a key part of our discourse during this conference, I must strongly warn you to ensure that you demonstrate high level of professionalism, strong supervisory capacity on your units, and the firmness and courage which are the traditional hallmark of the police mobile force.
Right, Tundu, let's go straight to it. Two stories.
Yes, what's happened with the Anambra deputy decamping on the eve of the election, I guess it's not unusual. We saw the same thing in Ondo State 4 months to the election when Agboola Ajayi, the deputy governor of Ondo State under Rotimi Akeredolu, decamped to PDP and then to Zenith Labour Party, and he did not resign as deputy governor. He refused to do so. We also seen Zamfara, the case with Bello Matawale, when he decamped to APC and his deputy, Mahdi Gusso, insisting that he will stay on in PDP, and they're rumbling along like that. He hasn't resigned either. So I'm not expecting a resignation in this case of Anambra, but it does seem very strange. It really looks quite bad, I have to say, that the deputy would resign on the eve, almost, of an election. Obviously, they're still going to be in power for a few more months until the next governor is sworn in, but it looks bad. But what is most striking to me is when he said, when APC approached me, I want to know about APC's powers of persuasion. Exactly how do they get these political bigwigs to, you know, decamp? There's obviously something. I wonder what that is. What are their bargaining chips? Because they do approach these people. It's not like they just wake up and decide, oh, APC is really where to go. They are actually courted. They're wooed by APC. And I'm curious as to exactly what that might be. Well, you're a politician. Would you know how they go about it? I really am so curious.
Okay. Well, let me make a number of points. The first is the fact that before now, some other persons from particularly the PDP had defected to the ruling All Progressives Congress. And we had expressed the fear then that Nigeria, ahead of the 2023 elections, may be facing the risk of having a one-party state, a dominant one party that will just have a walkthrough in the 2023 elections. And some of these politicians that are behind this, they are tested enough. They know the game. So you rig the election, you know, one way or the other, in a strategic manner before the election itself. Having seen that, okay, many Nigerians are asking for electronic transmission. They are saying that credibility of and integrity of elections, you know, are important factors. So what is the best way to rig the election ahead of it? It's just simply by getting critical stakeholders into your fold. But we have that fear that we don't end up as a one-party state. After Femi Fani-Kayode defected to the same ruling party, one of the outcomes of that conversation at that time was the declaration that, in fact, more governors, more deputy governors, more persons will join. In the case of Anambra State, Dr. Nkem Okeke, as deputy governor, yesterday, officially declared for the APC. Before him, some members of the State House of Assembly also defected from Apga to the same APC. So you see that there is a strategy by the APC to make sure that they took over Anambra. A third observation has to do with the tone of Dr. Nkem Okeke's statement. He says, well, you know, his interest area is a public office, public service, where he can add value, and that he thinks that he will be better off in the APC. So what is the problem? Is it possible that under Willie Obiano as governor, he has not been given the opportunity to express himself, to make a difference? He's been treated as many deputy governors are treated. And you are right, this is not new. It dates back to even, you know, 1999 to 2003. When deputy governors, because there is no clear definition of their roles, are treated as spare tires. And these spare tires are never used. And that takes me quickly to the reaction of the spokesperson of the Apga, the ruling political party in Anambra, saying that Dr. Nkem Okeke is a deadwood, a political deadwood, according to him. I'm quoting him. And that he started behaving abnormally. Again, I'm quoting him. You know, these are not my thoughts or words. Immediately after the party primaries that produced Professor Charles Soludo, and that he was not happy, that he thought maybe he would have been the one that would be encouraged, that would be supported to succeed the incumbent governor of Anambra State. But if you look around the country, how many deputy governors from one point to the other ever had any good relationship with their principals? How many of them were ever encouraged to succeed their principals? And that's why some people argue that, look, we need to take a second look at the Constitution in terms of the role of these persons we call deputies. Either is the deputy governor at the state level or the vice president at the federal level. So, but clearly, Anambra is a very difficult proposition in terms of the elections scheduled for November 6. Now, the Inspector General of Police, the other part of the story that was reported, is saying, oh, you know, they will provide security, he was giving a charge to his men on the ground and all of that. Well, INEC specifically requested that security is a major challenge in Anambra State, and of course it is. Many of the political candidates for the November 6th election, some of them have suspended their campaigns. Some have even fled from the state.
Some are campaigning in Lagos.
Yes, and we had the spectacle
YPP.
of Ifeanyi Uba, the candidate of the YPP, campaigning on the streets of Lagos yesterday, specifically at Alaba. The people in Alaba market, they may be predominantly Igbo, but they probably will not go home to vote. So you find this paradox because of security reasons, whereby, persons who are to be on the ground to engage with the electorate at the state level are, carrying out their campaigns in Lagos. Lagos is about 5 hours to Anambra, to Onitsha, if you go by road. But it is not safe to, organize campaigns there. The campaigns have to take place in Lagos. Some of the candidates, as I said, have even stopped campaigning. They are just hoping that, well, whatever will happen, would happen. Now, that in itself, is an abbreviation of the democratic process, of the electoral process. So to hear the Inspector General of Police saying they will provide adequate security, well, I hope the Nigeria Police will be able to walk the talk. Because in this country, as I said, talk is cheap. So all of this may just be rhetorical presentations just to impress people and to justify the funding proposals ahead of the election, because the police will also need resources. So that should not be the purpose of all of this. We hope that the Nigeria Police, that they are really ready and that the Inspector General of Police knows what he's talking about.
Well, you let me know when APC approaches you, won't you?
Yeah, please, give us the memo on time. But like you said, it's just sad that people can't campaign on ground. In fact, those that are campaigning are doing that at the risk of their lives. An Apga campaign rally, 6 people lost their life.
Awful.
Unknown gunmen came in there. There was a shootout with the military. And you would say, if that's the campaign of the incumbent party, that could lead to loss of lives, then how about people like the PDP, the APC, and some other political parties? Something has to be done.
Well, although the Obiano government is blaming external forces outside Anambra for the violence.
Okay, external forces, yeah. May the force be with them. Right, that's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Michael Wilson, Adeso Omoro, and Aaron Akerila to give us updates on global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Now for Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Inflation once again really worrying everybody this morning after those Chinese PPI figures, I'll give you the details in a moment, came in. And also a big monetary surprise from Singapore, which I'll come to in a moment. First of all then, Asia-Pacific stocks, and they advanced. China's factory price rise more than expected. Shanghai Composite up about 1%, 0.1% rather. Tiny moves basically. But producer inflation actually soared in China in September. Official data showed 10.7% compared up 10.7% compared with a year ago. That was above the 10.5 expected. Consumer price index not quite as bad, slightly below the 0.9%, which had been predicted actually at 0.7%. So most of the markets have breathed a sigh of relief that inflationary pressures not too bad in China, although I would caution that those PPI figures show that down in the value chain there is still a lot of price pressure. China, Nikkei 225 up 1.25, topics up about 0.5%. So on to Singapore, and a surprise move from then. The Monetary Authority of Singapore, that's its central bank, tightened monetary policy. Now, it's a bit technical, this. It raised slightly the slope of its currency band while keeping unchanged the width of it. In other words, it's just a hint that tightening is down the line. The economy grew 6.5% in the third quarter of 2021, slightly above what was expected there. As far as the is concerned, their inflation numbers came in more or less in line with expectations. Core consumer price index rose 0.2% month on month in September, 4% over the last 12 months compared to an estimate of indeed 4%. So particularly more or less in line there. But with the Fed minutes that we were looking at yesterday, the nature of discussions appear to show that tapering is going to happen sooner rather than later. Here's a theory about it, which seems to be borne by what some of the market experts are saying: $5 billion a month in mortgage-backed securities and $10 billion a month in US Treasuries. So that's a sort of relaxation of buying that the Fed is going to do, and it's worried about inflation. It's lasting longer and it's more core than people had actually thought it was going to be. We'll be talking about the jobless figures in the Global Business Report this afternoon, and on Anna Rise just after 2:30. And although the CPI numbers are not quite as bad as expected, we shouldn't actually forget that supply chains problems exist in the United States. It is the US reporting season, of course, just started yesterday. JP Morgan, stellar figures, boost profits up 2.1 billion, really setting the bar for Citigroup, which is reporting today. Delta Airlines warning that fuel shortages and increased fuel costs will hit their profits. High fuel costs will push them into losses perhaps in Q4. And as I said, the jobless figures out at lunchtime today. I'm going to bring you to the EU, and French fishermen are promising further blockades. They've seen the damage that the gas and petrol shortages happen to in this country. They're going to do more, and they will create another shortage of something else. They haven't said what it's going to be. Ready to block everything, they're saying. Calais, Dunkirk, the Channel Tunnel. They need the fishing licenses from the UK and from Jersey in particular, and they say they'll do anything to get it. As far as the EU is concerned, the Brexit discussions about Northern Ireland and so on, the EU is saying it's gone the extra mile. We can talk about the detail if you want to, but there's 3 weeks of discussions coming up about that. So it's very much, taking the places and seeing what the outline talks actually are. When the Brexit deal was agreed less than 2 years ago, both sides signed up to this Northern Ireland Protocol, the part aimed to stop checks along the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. That's not happening at the moment. There are still checks there, and businesses finding it's fairly sticky. So lots of talk to happen there. As far as the UK is concerned, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak saying he's doing everything he can to make sure that shelves are not empty at Christmas. He's blamed global factors like delays seen at ports like at Felixstowe and so on, and it comes as G7 ministers agreed to work together to solve the supply issues, which are not just hitting the UK, but all the developed G7 economies right now. 2 more UK economy firms have gone bust. They're only small ones, but it does actually point to this idea that you can actually cap the prices in an industry which is suffering. They're saying that they're not allowed to increase prices, thus have gone out of business. As far as commodities are concerned, generally speaking, a rise in natural gas, iron ore and copper futures have given an additional boost to markets which export those, particularly Australia, for example. Oil prices very much trading sideways as we speak, and gold, an impressive rally. I've searched around. I do not know why gold has rallied. I have to confess to you, ladies and gentlemen, it seems that gold is moving inversely to the US dollar. I don't know why. I don't know what's happened. I don't know whether we become slightly more risk averse. Maybe we have. But that is the global view this morning.
Right. It's a golden age anyway. Just something to laugh about. But real quickly, Michael, the first thing, there's a talk about Rishi Sunak looking at touching pension funds in the UK, to be able to bolster the economy. I'm scared because anytime I hear pension funds in the UK, my oh my, where my mind goes to is Robert Maxwell in the 90s and what he did with pension funds. So reassure me, for people like you that have those pension funds, reassure me that it's not going to be another Robert Maxwell episode. And secondly, is the China bubble busting finally now? China's got energy crisis. Factories in China now have to use generator, just like factories in Nigeria, diesel power generator to power their operations. So China is becoming like Nigeria. And you have the Evergrande scandal that is there, and people are saying China is trying to mask the effect of that. So is this bubble called China beginning to burst now? Two questions.
Well, I think if there were a bubble there, I think we've probably seen the effects of that as far as properties is concerned. You see, the problem with it is we never really know what's going on there. What we've seen is all right. Here it is in broad terms, as I understand it. I understand that Xi Jinping wants to have a sort of commonwealth of wealth in China. The previous administration allowed growth to run rampant to get the economy actually going, but the riches were not shared more widely. I think that's what it's trying to do. So if it involves letting the air, not bursting the bubble, but letting the air out of the bubble and increase regulatory concerns across the big tech companies and so on, I think they are probably doing that. As far as it actually going pop, I just don't think that'll be allowed to happen somehow. It's not within as I understand it, the Chinese Commonwealth psyche to allow that to happen. And if it indeed does go pop, I think that probably the effects of it will be masked by enormous funds of money, of which we have no idea of how much the government actually is prepared to spend, actually going into the markets to try to steady it. So I think that's what will happen in China. I think all the warning signs are there. I think down the supply chains, the PPI numbers show that the warning signs are there. We know the warning signs in property. We know that they're buying up everything because of their mines have been flooded and their huge amount of coal, and they're going to have to come to COP26 in November to explain to the world what their energy and climate stroke green policies actually are. So there's a lot going on, but I don't think the bubble is bursting. I think it's coming to terms with real life. But if you want to have a commonwealth, then you have to share the riches with the non-riches, if you see what I mean. As far as pension funds are concerned, you think about Robert Maxwell, I think about Gordon Brown, actually. Robert Maxwell plundered the pension funds of the Daily Mirror newspaper when he owned it. What Gordon Brown did was to reduce the dividend tax relief on pensions when he became Chancellor, 1997. That affected everybody. Pension funds are very, very important. Number one, of course, what we know is that they provide investment to other parts of the world. We know that too. But they're important as well because if you're a private individual and you work for private industry, you create your own pension fund. You're not dependent upon the state. And that should actually guide you through the demographic problems that society actually has. That's what I think. So he may well try to do that. I've seen the headlines. I think there's a long way between headlines and actually doing it. A Treasury minister will get his hands on as much tax as possible to get him out of the problems that he's in. This is just one try, I think. I hope so.
Michael, quickly, two things. I understand we have just 3 minutes. First, further focus on the proposals by the EU on Northern Ireland. Sefcovic, the negotiator on the EU side, says that they've gone far enough and that this is the final proposal and that the fundamentals will not be touched. Northern Ireland will remain in the single market. European court judges will still police protocols there. And, the customs border will remain down the Irish Sea. But David Frost, on the UK side, is saying that the sovereignty of Britain over Northern Ireland is not even on the table. And all the proposed protocols should be scrapped. And yet we're told there will be a conversation around these proposals. But the fear is that Boris Johnson will not shift and that the UK will not shift. Do you see any hope of any compromise, particularly since there are things about sovereignty there? And then very quickly, the G7 meeting in Washington and all that talk about global cooperation and what to do about supply chains. Do you think that some of those plans will be achieved before Christmas? Now that we hear that people have been advised, by retailers to start buying their Christmas gifts now. Otherwise, it's going to be a blue Christmas, to quote Donald Trump. Although that may not be the best person to quote.
Well, as far as Northern Ireland's concerned, I think there's intransigence from Brussels, there's intransigence from the UK. I would expect those kind of positions to be taken. At the moment, it looks like, there's lots of detail so far. I would remind you, of course, and I'm sure I don't need to, that there's 3 weeks of discussions to take place over this. So I think it's probably what normally happens is this goes right to the end, and then there's a sort of moving of positions towards the end of it. But I feel as though what the UK does not want is the fact that Brussels still wants to have, as it were, legal sovereignty over Northern Ireland. Now, that does not chime in with Brexit as it happens. I know it was a fairly messy kind of thing, and I'm not speaking in defence of it. It's the way that politics actually run at the moment. I don't think the UK is going to accept sovereignty from the EU. So what's the EU going to do? What is the absolute final thing that the EU can actually do? What, take us to court? I don't think so. Take us to international court? So what? I mean, here we have the difficulty. What the mainland is trying to do is to maintain peace between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and peace between the communities within Northern Ireland as well, as a result of the peace process that expired in 1990, or was proposed in 1997, all those years ago. It's incredibly complicated. I would not like to hazard a guess as to what's going to happen. I just hope that these 3 weeks of discussions may well help. But do remember that we have a French president who is fomenting a lot of strife between France and the UK for his own political ends, because he's facing election. And we've got a new administration, possibly in Germany. We've certainly got a leader of the new majority government in Germany, and that may well change things. So I think it's floating at the moment, but it is an issue of sovereignty, and that's what Brexit was all about. I still think there are 3 weeks of discussions to take place. I prefer to talk about it after that kind of period, when we get up to those final days. As far as the G7 and supply chains are concerned, well, if there is cooperation, I haven't seen it so far. The G7, again, of course, is not really representative of supply chains as we know them. It doesn't include China, for example, and it doesn't include many African countries as well. So therefore, if what G7 is predicting is some side of cooperation, well, actually, do you know what? They're not really singing to the choir, are they? They're singing to themselves. I can see all this. Personally, I think that Christmas is somehow being held up as some kind of totemic period during which there must not be empty shelves. So there are empty shelves at Christmas. So people get together and swap smaller presents. So what? I really don't get it. I see how politicians think it's important. I will protect Christmas, says the Chancellor. Yeah, well, okay. We may be just accepting smaller presents. Who cares? And don't do the Scrooge thing with me either, because it's not.
You know I was about to.
You are the Scrooge.
You know I was about to.
You are the Scrooge, Michael.
It's a season of peace and goodwill and full shelves to all mankind. But I also wanted to talk about the European Court of Justice retaining its oversight role or not. But we've run out of time, so maybe tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Ebenezer. Thank you.
Can we move on, please?
All right. Thank you for that. For updates on COVID-19, Adeso Moro is here with us. Great to have you, Adeso.
Great to be here, Rufai, Tundu, and Dr. Abati. This is to say that there shall be a debriefing of that joke that went around behind the cameras. I'd like to know what
Inside baseball, yeah, in Lagos.
All right. Well,
Good to see you.
A good thing, because we begin on a good note today on the COVID-19 pandemic. There is cause for some reprieve, as the weekly assessment of the pandemic shows that there continues to be a decline, a downward trend that began in late August. And although there were 2.8 million new infections and about 46,000 deaths in the last week alone, the WHO in its assessment, and Johns Hopkins University provides the figures, says that's a drop, a 7% and 10% respectively. So that's 7% drop in global cases in the last week and a 10% drop in global deaths in the last week as well. Well, on regional basis, Europe reported a 7% rise in cases, while other regions reported a decrease. And in Europe, countries such as Britain, Turkey, and Russia saw the highest cases in the week under review. Now, the biggest drops in cases came in Africa and the Western Pacific, where case numbers fell by 32%. That's a whopping 32% for Africa and 27% for the Western Pacific. Deaths in both regions also fell more than a third. So that's a good thing. Hopefully, countries and regions can keep this trend downward. Meanwhile, officials here in Nigeria have revealed that the last 4 weeks of testing have shown the trend of infection is also on a downward trend, however, in some states. In other states, the country is seeing an upward trajectory. No further details were given on the states and what is responsible for this trend. That's in Nigeria. And in the last 24 hours, of course, the country reported 251 new cases and 5 related COVID-19 deaths. The nation's capital, Abuja, and 13 states were responsible for the latest tally. Now, Rufai, Tundu, and Dr. Abati, it began in Edo State. It was quickly followed by Ondo and Osun State. And now, federal workers in Nigeria would have to show proof that they are vaccinated or be denied access to their offices. But let's listen to the head of the COVID-19 task force in Nigeria make that announcement yesterday. Let's listen in.
2021. All federal government employees shall be required, all without exception, shall be required to show proof of COVID-19 vaccination or present a negative COVID-19 PCR test result done within 72 hours to gain access to their places of work in all locations within Nigeria and in our missions.
Well, there you have it. The chairman of the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 in Nigeria, Boss Mustafa, also at that briefing, he confirmed the removal of South Africa, Turkey, and Brazil from the country's restricted travel list. Nigeria had in May this year, you would recall, placed a ban on travelers coming in from India, Brazil, Turkey, and of course, South Africa, because of the trend of coronavirus cases in those countries. But last month, you recall that the country removed India from that list of 4 countries, otherwise known as Nigeria's red list. Now it's taken off the remaining 3 countries, meaning Nigeria currently, at the moment, doesn't have any red list or restricted countries to travel to. The PSC says Nigeria will continue to review the country's protocol based on global development, science, and national experience. We do expect a revised protocol to be announced any moment today, as promised by Boss Mustafa yesterday. Well, plans to impose vaccine passports for African travelers is not going down well, I must tell you guys, with the continent's aviation ministers. They believe that the touted proposal is unacceptable and tantamount to discrimination against certain groups of the population. And their view was made known by the Nigerian Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika, during a conference yesterday. Some economic blocs and countries are planning to impose those mandates for travel passports for African travelers. Even within the continent, some countries such as Botswana has imposed travel restrictions. If you do not have a passport, a vaccine passport to show, you may not be granted access into the country or be subjected to some requirements to come into the country. And finally, this morning, the WHO, the World Health Organization, has announced the establishment of a scientific advisory group aimed at identifying the origin of COVID-19 and to prepare, we've never seen this before, to prepare for further outbreaks of other deadly pathogens. The WHO Scientific Advisory Group for Origins of Novel Pathogens, otherwise known as SAGO, S-A-G-O, SAGO, will include scientists from the US, China, and about 24 other countries. We're yet to get a response from China on this latest development.
Of course, there's no response from China. I'm sorry, they're still trying to hide or cover their tracks. But I guess I'm a bit baffled. The remarks that you kindly shared with us about, what we just saw about the COVID committee, the paragraph 7 that you just played, talking about how federal government workers should present proof that they've been vaccinated for COVID-19 or present a negative test to gain access to their offices. Surely that's not a one-off negative test, is it? Because even at the rate that we're going with the advent of booster jabs, your COVID pass, as it were, is not even a one-off in itself. So how often are federal workers expected to get tested for COVID-19 and be presenting their results weekly, daily, monthly, what?
So, Tundu, it's a 72 hours recognized test the federal government is asking for, meaning that in a week, the workers would have to do at least, from my mathematics, at least 2 tests a week to be able to gain access to their offices. There are groups who are already kicking against this, including the umbrella body of doctors in Nigeria, the Nigerian Medical Association.
It would seem to me that what the federal government of Nigeria wants to do is to compel, federal government workers to take the vaccine. And we've seen this in the United States when last month, President Biden issued that mandate, including even federal contractors, on the basis of which American Airlines and Southwest Airlines objected to the position of Greg Abbott, who is opposed to, the mandate in the state of Texas. And they said, look, they would rather go with the federal government. While in principle, it's a good idea, well, it probably does not go far enough. Now, the question to ask is, what is the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 in Nigeria doing to make sure that when federal civil servants, as would probably be the case, now rush to take the vaccine, that those vaccines will be available and that they will be prioritized and they will not be sanctioned in any particular way? And if some raise objections on religious grounds, as we have seen in the state of New York, in Dr. A and others versus Kocho, the state governor, what will be the response of the Nigerian government? And this directive that has been given with regard to federal government workers, are we likely to see states, in Nigeria and local governments also saying that they are following the example of the federal government? But I think that the basic thing here is to get more, doses, more vaccines, and nobody should be punished if they cannot have access to those vaccines. As for China, yes, well, there's been a big problem with tracing the origins of the COVID-19. You recall it took months before China eventually allowed WHO investigators to get into China in February. And even then, their activities were restricted severely. They wanted to go into some other places, they were not allowed. China was monitoring the situation. But the principle, as stated by Gabriel Jesus, the WHO Director General, is that, look, if we know the origins of what happened in China, then, of course, we'll be able to prevent similar diseases, similar pandemic in the future. But China's position is that SEGO is an attempt to politicize, the investigation of origins. And the Chinese ambassador to the United Nations said clearly yesterday that maybe the WHO and others should look in other directions beyond China. And they think that what is being done is anti-science in their view. Now, that was the same position that China maintained when President Biden asked for an intelligence report on the origins of the COVID-19. But that intelligence report, the American media said, was inconclusive. To the extent that this is for, the common global good, to prevent similar pandemics in the future, to raise the level of global preparedness, as Michael Ryan is the WHO director in charge of emergencies, says, I think it would be a good idea. But would the Chinese cooperate? Would the Chinese allow a proper investigation? Would all the theories be tested? Is it human-to-human transmission or transmission from bats to humans? Or could it be a leak from a laboratory, which is, an angle, a theory that the Chinese do not want to listen to? So we still have, all these issues of geopolitics at the heart of the investigation.
Well, thank you so much, Adeswa.